Well, hello, welcome to Sweet Stories. Christian, it's so good to have you with us, founder and CEO of Magpie Travel. Thank you for joining us, and we're here in actually the wonderful Tokyo for this podcast, so very excited for our conversation today. Going to specify and be specific on sort of generative AI and how that can help the travel industry, and maybe, what can the travel industry learn from maybe other industries, and are we missing any tricks, and where can we develop and grow? But first I want to take it right back, just to learn a bit more about you, your story, and how did you, become the founder and CEO of Magpie Travel. So it'd be great to hear more.
Yeah, bit of a around the world story. Started from Newcastle.
Okay.
And it was a choice of Newcastle or San Francisco, and I went to San Francisco to ride a pedicab, tricycle.
Yeah.
And then bought a bus, started a tour company, so about 20-something years doing hop-on, hop-off buses in San Francisco. And then Magpie was solving a problem we had, which was that we were always changing content and descriptions and sending it to 150 resellers, OTAs and tour operators. And just keeping that up to date was a constant problem. So we created Magpie to solve that.
Okay.
Because you go to the trade shows and you see everyone else doing the same thing, and you realize we shouldn't all be emailing Word docs and Excel files and everything around. There's a better way to do it. So created Magpie to solve our own problem, really. And
that's probably how good businesses start, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite a niche thing. It's quite hard to describe Magpie. Content management. It's not the sort of thing you come and invent out of school. So it comes out of being in the business for so long, and you sort of recognize what you spend time on.
Yeah, and how big is the team on?
We're a small team. We launched March 2020.
Okay.
Which was an interesting month.
Just right before COVID.
Yeah. We launched that Arrival, which was tagged onto ITB. Do you remember that ITB was cancelled that year? So we were small then, and we've actually kept it small since. And then since Gen AI came along, we're using that to sort of fill the gaps.
Okay.
So we're trying to remain small and grow with technology.
And the whole hub is in San Francisco?
Yeah, we're remote, so actually no office right now.
Okay, and then I suppose it's like a tech-savvy place to be, so you're probably right in the heart of the conversation at the moment.
Yeah, you can walk into any coffee shop and just talk about LLMs or any kind of other AI tech that you want, and you can geek out all day.
Most people understand.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And I must confess, I'm not like the most savvy of the AI world, which I think is quite useful for this conversation. But could you, for our viewers listening, going into the world of generative AI and LLMs, have you said, could you just explain a little bit about what that is and a little bit of history of AI, I guess, as well?
So it's all new. AI has been around forever, but this version of AI just started 2 years ago with ChatGPT. And that was the first time most people in the world had ever used anything to do with AI, right? And we all got it on the same day. Nobody had advanced warning, really. Some people did, but most people didn't. And an LLM is a large language model. That's a brain. So in effect now we've all got access to this brain it's read everything. It sort of knows everything. And we can now ask it questions. So it's a magic tool that sort of arrived out of nowhere. Nobody was talking about this before ChatGPT. And all of a sudden it landed, and it's moving so fast now. And I do think, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but it's intimidating, I think. People don't know where to start, and they don't know which tool, and I get this all the time, but it's actually quite easy just to jump in and just start asking questions. I use the voice mode all the time.
Yeah.
People think I'm weird walking around talking to myself, but I'm talking to my AI in my ear and asking her questions, and it's a nice way just to sort of get used to how it works and what you can learn.
Would you say AI at the moment is sort of shaping how your day to day, and has quite a big influence on the way you now do things to maybe what you did even before, I guess, 2020?
Yeah, somewhat. It's hard when you look at yourself, because I talk a lot about AI, so I'm trying to look at myself. Am I a typical person? I definitely sort of study it more than the average person should or definitely needs to. But yeah, it changes my day to day. Probably the biggest thing, and I hear that people all the time, is they don't Google anymore. ChatGPT becomes their default search engine sort of thing. And I hear that more and more, which is definitely worrying if you're Google, I think.
Yeah, who are the sort of key players then? Google we always see as a multi-huge company, and it does play into the world of AI, I suppose. They're probably aware of this, but who are the key players within the field at the moment?
Yeah, so it's all the big tech companies. So the LLMs, right, they're owned by, so ChatGPT is the sort of number one. They're partnered with Microsoft. So if you use Copilot or any of the Microsoft tools, you're getting ChatGPT as part of that. Google's got Gemini.
Yep.
Facebook's got their own version.
Yeah,
Amazon's got a different version now. So all the big tech players are sort of, except for Apple. Apple aren't really moving on this stuff.
What would you say that is?
I don't know. It's a bit worrying that they haven't moved. They've got a partnership now with ChatGPT. I think they probably feel like they can partner their way through it for now. Tough to say.
And I mean, we see also like Meta. They've got like the glasses,
The Ray-Bans.
sort of shaping that. I know you own a pair as well, do you?
Yeah, I bought those quite early because it's fascinating. And you know, they play into your ear, so you can just use them as earphones as well. But they've got cameras, so you can record video or take photos, and you can speak to it.
Yeah.
So you can be walking around. In travel, this is interesting, right? You're walking around London, look at the thing. What's that? It's Big Ben. Tell me a story about Big Ben, and it could be your tour guide.
Yeah, and I guess that is leading nicely into in travel in the industry, and that's like one good example. But where can you see AI having sort of its biggest influence currently in the travel industry?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the chat in the last couple of years has been sort of trip planning space, and I do a lot of demos. And I think one of the easiest ways to use ChatGPT in this industry is create a 3-day itinerary of my trip to Tokyo, because it's so good, and then we can all understand it, and we can all sort of get our heads around how that works. So I think travel discovery is interesting. It's not really moved into the booking part yet, but last week, as we're recording this, was the first sort of agent, the OpenAI agent.
Okay.
Which means I can now give it instructions and say, plan me a 3-day trip to Tokyo and book hotels and activities. And it goes off now as an agent, and it goes and browses websites and can book the hotels at the same time. So it can find the buttons, hit the book now button, go to the calendar, choose the dates, go through the whole process, choose the rooms. Yes, you're going to have questions as part of that most likely, but it can come back to you and say, listen, I've got some choices.
Yeah.
I've got some decisions to make.
I think that's key, and when people are using it as well, is like AI isn't just what you see as the answer and you have to use that. It's like it's still learning as well, and you need to feed into it to maybe either better understand or get the sort of outcome that you're looking for. But also, I guess, even from a travel agent point of view, it shouldn't give you all the answers, but it should be maybe as a guide, would you say? Yeah, to support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the personalization piece, so I use it for business, for just business strategy. So I save a doc, and it's literally just a Word doc of my company sort of strategy and what we do, and I describe it all in text. And then when I ask a question of ChatGPT, it's got that. So I can just say, listen, what would be a good strategy for Magpie to follow to get more customers this year? And it can just refer to that doc and say, well, Magpie should be doing this, and knows exactly what we're trying to do and what we've done before that's worked and hasn't, and it's my personalized sort of assistant.
Yeah. Have you seen it sort of shape and improve your business in general then, in your strategy? Yeah.
I mean, it's the sort of thing that I did an article last week on reviews. I don't use ChatGPT to write at all. I don't feel genuine. But I did a sort of white paper on reviews. And I talked to the team. I said, this is a white paper I just wrote up. They first of all said, it doesn't look like your style. I said, it's not. It's just 100% AI. But it got everything. It got, I was asking the sort of how reviews feature in the travel industry, where they might evolve, what might change. And it would have been, if we'd have sat here for 5 hours and written an essay on this, it got everything that we could have come up with. Yeah, I guess that played on a little point as well of, you mentioned there, you put work together and it's, you openly said that's AI, but there's so much of it out in the world at the moment. And I think even from my point of view, it's hard to see what is and isn't AI. And what's your sort of stance on that in terms of people using it? Should we be more open about, not trying to pretend that we've had this support from AI and actually be open about that? Or what's your sort of thought process on that? Yeah, I feel like you should be open if you're using it. But it's hard to say, if you use a word processor, are they still called word processors?
Who knows?
Whatever they're called, is that's sort of AI. That's not, if it's fixed your typos, then is that really you? But I think, I see it on LinkedIn, people come in with these comments and you just look at it and think, if you're not going to make an effort to be like a real human, why are you doing this? But there's a fine line. What I don't think people should do is write a post or write an email that's generated by AI and pretend that they came up with that. I think if your customer sort of catches you writing an email and acting like you wrote it, that comes across pretty disingenuous, and it's not what people want right now. Maybe in the future that'll be the norm, but I think right now it wouldn't come across well.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you want to still keep that, because you can instantly see when you're reading something and it probably doesn't sound quite like that person. You think, is something changed there, or is it someone else? Right. And you want to feel like you're speaking to the person you're speaking to, especially as the humans.
Yeah. It is a thing, isn't it? If you told me, I ask you, listen, can you point me to a good marketing book on how to run a travel company? And you say, yeah, this AI wrote the best one that exists. I don't want to read it. I want to read one that was written by a human, even if it's worse. I don't really know why. Yeah. But I'm not interested in written computer-generated. I'm not interested in reading computer-generated content. Yeah. And I also think at the moment, what's great about human brain is, you even see it in like film, for example. You do take after take after take, and there's different ways of doing it, and then suddenly you'll see this one that like works really well. And I think if you're just relying purely on the AI, that you'll probably lose all that, and you'll lose those other 100 different ways of thinking about it. Or it all becomes bland and maybe too perfect. It'll be grammatically perfect and all the content will be right, but we won't have that sort of. I sometimes think it's our deficiencies almost that make us interesting. It's the little things that don't go perfect that make life interesting or make humans interesting. Exactly, and especially in travel as well. Travel is about the experiences, the memory, the emotion, which currently, AI in the way it's used doesn't have that much emotion right now. I might be wrong though, but I suppose in certain situations maybe there is, but particularly in the travel industry, it's been important on how you use it. And what would you say is sort of key, for a travel company, a hotel, a DMC, or even a tour operator? What's the easiest way to implement AI into their business that still keeps, the essence of the brand, but is a way to sort of elevate what they're doing? Well, I think in any company, there's lots of people. Some are taking this on and running with it, and some are going to hold off and we're going to stick to the old way of doing things. I think everyone needs to understand this is here and it's here for good. And you could call it a tool. I don't think AI is a tool, but it is part of it is a tool, and we should be using the best for the best we can. So I think embracing it on a company level, and I think it needs to start at the top. Encourage all employees to be using the best of the tools, share the knowledge, share what worked and what didn't work. I think the problem in a lot of companies is it can be a person replacement, right? And I know a lot of companies, if I do my job in half the time, am I just going to get myself fired? And that's how a lot of people think. And I think maybe that's how some companies act, and they shouldn't. But hopefully there's enough other tasks to be done. But I think going AI first, understanding that it's here. I think not being confused by all the tools. There's a million tools out there. Just starting with ChatGPT or Gemini or one of these LLMs is the best way to start. You could spend your life trying to adopt all the latest suite of tools and trying to get it all to plug in, and a month later, that's all changed, and you should have gone with this other one instead. So yeah. And do you think, so then if, potentially, people say making yourselves more efficient, actually could then open up, you'd have more opportunity to be more creative, I guess. So getting rid of, we all say in our day-to-day jobs, I want to get rid of those tasks, it's so long to do, I'd rather be focusing on something else. I guess that also allows that opportunity. Even things like chatbots is like obviously a very basic one to, like I think you say all hotels should be implementing that, because it's that customer service that's like instant.
regardless of time zone, time if an employee is available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing there is it's tasks, right? So we all have different roles. We all do lots of different things during the day, I think. And it's going to replace just task by task. So it can replace, if I do an average of 20 different types of tasks a day, it might replace 3 of them. The guy, I think it was the CEO of Indeed, which is now the biggest employment recruiting site. He said they looked at something like 7,000 job descriptions in the world, and he said every single one of them are going to be majorly infected because they went through their platform and looked at all the jobs out there. But he said not one job was sort of 100% replaceable. So it's really looking at those tasks. Yeah, it's the stuff that you don't want to do. If you can get rid of that, and then the next day find another thing, and the next day, hopefully you got enough stuff up here that you can still work on.
Have you implemented any in your own business?
Yeah, it's which is another, I think, important thing. Sometimes it's the easy things, right? You're looking at a PDF, you've got a list of things, maybe a list of potential customers, and before you try and copy it and paste it, and you can't quite get that into an Excel. Sometimes it's as easy as that, just taking that and using ChatGPT to create a list from this doc. Yeah. And then put it on a sheet for me. It doesn't need to be the most complex tool you're building. It's just save me 30 seconds there.
Yeah. I sometimes use it for like if there's very long emails or pages of text. For me, it's like, okay, can you summarize these into the key top points that I need to be aware of that affect me, and then you can save yourself time. Maybe I can go back to that later and read the whole thing, but for that instant, maybe it's in a meeting or you need to just be prepared just before you're going in. Like that sort of element is quite useful, isn't it, in the day-to-day job?
Yeah, I saw a meme last week. There were 2 people on the other end of an email. One person's saying, I found this tool that I can just type in a couple of bullets and it creates a whole long email. And then the person who's receiving the email says, I found this tool that takes this whole long email and creates a couple of bullets. Which is what we do. It's rude to just send an email with a couple of bullets sometimes if you're trying to foster a relationship. So you make all the fluff around it. But all they want is the 2 bullets.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I suppose it goes back to that sort of relationship building. You think you need to add the fluff, which maybe AI isn't about. It's just the direct approach, isn't it?
Yeah. It can create the fluff if you want, but then it can also delete the fluff when it needs to.
Yeah, and I guess it's something that we've spoken about before as well, but like data compression, that sort of element is, so I guess it's kind of on that topic as well, but what's sort of the data compression element? Where do you see that as sort of valuable, and can you explain a little bit more about what that is as well?
Yeah, that's my favorite topic. And I mention it to my family every day and they roll their eyes and, oh God, he's got another data compression story. But the story I like to tell is when you wake up in the morning and you get on your phone, obviously first thing, and you're reading an article, reading the news, and your brain's taking in all of this, but it's compressing it in your brain. And then you listen to a podcast, and it's a 45-minute podcast, and you've remembered bits of it. And your brain's constantly taking lots of data and compressing it into smaller bits. You go to work, you show up at a meeting, and you've just compressed all that you've learned this morning, and you do a spiel for 30 seconds. And then somebody else has done the same that morning, and they come with 2 or 3 ideas. And now we're all consuming more data, and we're compressing that, and it keeps getting passed around. So all those words are getting passed around person to person via email, chat, discussion, whatever it is. In the end, somebody takes an action, which is write an email or create an Instagram post or do something. But until that point, it's just compressing data. And now we have these LLMs, these AIs, that's what they do. They compress data. So everything that we do to have to do with communications, it can do better than us, which is a little bit worrying, isn't it? That's all we do, is we communicate with each other. We're recording now, and people are going to listen to this, not remember the whole thing. They'll compress it into two ideas I got from that. They'll go and tell someone else, and now this thing can do all of that for us. Yeah, scary sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, I suppose it's not be too scared of it and embrace it, hopefully, at this stage in time. Yeah, it is scary, isn't it? And you listen to stories, but it's here. I listened to a good interview last week. Mustafa Suleyman, he was the co-founder of DeepMind, which is now Google. He now works for Microsoft. He's from London. And somebody asked him if it's the end of mankind, and he said, "What I worry about is that AI is going to make a social media or a vertical video app that's so good, we can't look away from it." And he said, "When I say can't look away, I mean we cannot look away. There's nothing better than that so it's next video, next video, next video, and your brain will be incapable. Even if there's food and you haven't eaten for 4 days, it's thinking, no, I have to see the next video." He says, "That's how we're going to die."
Wow. I think there's like, that is deep, but I think there's some movies probably made about that.
That's a Black Mirror episode right there, isn't it? Something like that, yeah.
Well, hopefully it doesn't quite come to that point in life. I mean, people are quite addicted to social media at the moment, but let's hope not that bad.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I want to go a little bit back because I find it quite interesting. You mentioned about like business and strategy, and I think we always talk about AI as operational and how you could be more efficient in your day-to-day, but I think there's probably a trick there as well of can it help elevate sort of creativity and not always look at it as, I'm improving my day-to-day tasks, but I can actually develop new ideas. What's your stance on sort of AI and the creativity part of things?
Yeah, you hear people all the time that say, "Listen, all this is doing is it's repeating what it's read on the internet." It's not. It's read everything on the internet, and it can create new ideas. And there's a discussion around what is creativity, but it's read everything to do with physics over here and chemistry over here and neuroscience here. And a lot of creativity is just combining different. When you walk around and you travel, your brain's looking at food here and the buildings, and it's taking different aspects which helping you find new ideas. And I think that's creativity, and it's taking ideas from different places and combining them and coming up with new stuff. But I think when people type in prompts and they want it to fail, they sort of type in a prompt and say, "Look, it just gave me what I already knew." But if you say, "No, don't give me that, give me something different and think creatively about it," it will give you different ideas.
Yeah, and prompts as a topic in itself as well. What's sort of an effective way to use that ChatGPT prompts?
Yeah, so there's a few sort of top tips on that. I always say treat it like an assistant. So just speak to it like it's a human assistant. But I get a lot of people sort of say, it's usually a question after a presentation or something, and they say, "Listen, I've got a hotel and I'm trying to market to Germans coming in July who are on Instagram and between the age of 40 and 50. How do I prompt it?" And I say, "Well, that's the prompt.
That's the prompt.
Just read that into the thing." And so I think just treating it like a human and then just being very to the point and concise. And voice is really good for that. I don't know if you use the voice.
I haven't yet, but I feel like I was listening to you earlier speaking into, and I think that is a useful way to do it through voice.
Yeah, and then it becomes a conversation and you go back and forth, and I always say it's a she, which is a problem, but she gives me ideas, and then I remember I took a drive probably 6 months ago. It was a 5-hour drive to see my daughter, and I was just talking for 5 hours to the AI. We're talking about history of San Francisco for an hour, and then we jumped to talk about AI. Then we talked about OTAs and the impact on AI and all this. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah, I suppose if you haven't got someone around you, something you're very interested about, and you like a conversation with someone about it, and they're not here, well, you've got one there at least.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe it's a new tackle for loneliness. Who knows?
I mean, you joke about it. I think it is.
Yeah.
Which is good and bad, right?
Yeah, that's true. And also on sort of creativity. Interestingly, I went to an event recently which I found fascinating, which was we drew. The topic was, where do you see the future of travel? How can you vision it? But all you do is simply, we just drew a picture. No one had to be an artist or anything, but it would draw a picture, and then we put it into this AI software, which then everyone did it in the room, and it created this like full scale picture of your vision, and everyone did the same thing. And it's in the room, then we had instantly 50 different visions of the future. I think that's sort of quite a powerful tool. Again, going back to that creativity, but also like strategy and development is, if you want to show something, a product, or this is how we want it to be, AI can help you with that. It's like a supporting tool.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't use the image to text enough, and it's pretty powerful. But people don't. It's not. A lot of the stuff's not intuitive when it comes to imagery as well and video. They don't think of immediate uses for it. Like with a lot of these tools, when they first come out, you sort of think that's great, but what am I going to use it for? And you get this. I think it's quite common in the AI folks, and they say if you were given AGI, so AGI is artificial general intelligence, which is when the AI can do everything that all humans can do as far as mental tasks. So we'll be at that point at some point in the future. And if you were given this thing tomorrow, what would you do? And most people are sort of think, well, I don't know. They just think of us weird, 10 things to do in Tokyo, rather than solve, massive problems. It's quite difficult to think initially how to use these tools, and then your brain starts thinking through it and thinks about the possibilities. And I think that's why you start small with these tools and just start asking simple questions, and you'll start realizing what else it can do.
Yeah, definitely. And on sort of the tools and that as well, from small businesses to big businesses, how can small, because a lot of our, I guess, community might be independent travel agents, or what's sort of the best way for a small company to use this? And I guess also there's a lot of free tools, so hopefully that supports them.
Yeah. So the key thing to remember is ChatGPT is one of the best. So is Gemini. I'm not here to promote brands or whatever, but let's say ChatGPT, you have the same access as Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg today to the best AI on the planet. Yeah. So whether you're a small, independent one-person travel agent, or whether you're Booking.com, you've got access to the same technology. All right, Booking can build lots of apps and things behind it, but you've got access to the same intelligence. So it's an equalizer, I think. It's a tool that we can all jump into. There's a $20 version, a paid version, which if you start using it heavily, you should probably do. But it's $20 a month. It's not significant for any business, really.
Would you then see that maybe as a threat to bigger businesses, that small businesses can get in slightly easier and quicker into the same sort of level of intelligence as those who've probably been studying it for a long time?
Yeah, I think it's a threat, isn't it? Because you've got, especially with software now, you can create software really quickly. You could probably build most of Booking.com using AI just to write the code. I've met people who've done it. I'm not saying it's fully working end to end, and I get it's complicated, there's contracts and there's payments and everything else, but to build a website like that isn't difficult anymore. You haven't got distribution, which is pretty important. Yeah. But that's coming down. Code is getting much cheaper and easier. So these big companies are going to have to stay ahead.
Yeah, I guess that's where the people element of how you then either portray that or put it out there or have the leading edge. If everyone can get the same sort of code and produce a similar website, it's then who's the player who can utilize it the best, or what do you do with that information? Which is key.
Yeah, it's execution on the plan, isn't it? So there's lots of ideas. Creating an OTA doesn't seem very complicated. Getting distribution and getting people to use it and contracts, everything is more work.
I guess that's why industries like ours is a good industry, because it's all about people. So you build your networks, but also you can't necessarily feel going to Japan or San Francisco. You kind of have to go there to experience it in real life, to have those emotional side, which maybe that AI won't have because it's not you.
Yeah, and I think, because we all ask this question of what AI is going to do to travel, I feel like the experience part of travel, I hope, isn't affected much, right? When you actually on your holiday or your vacation, you're walking around whatever, Paris and the cafes and the cathedrals, you don't want AI to be any part of that. You want to be in the town and sort of feel the town with the locals and that side of it, and you hope it's not robots and the robot waiter. Maybe they'll be more polite than the French waiters, but you hope the human element stays as part of that, and that's what the AI affects everything before that point, makes everything more efficient before that point.
Yeah, it saves us time on the things so we can enjoy more of the things we want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
for sure. And a lot of people, I guess, in the travel industry, I would say probably the travel industry is slightly behind other, industries within the AI world, and a lot of them see it as a big threat, but also some of them are naive and think it won't affect them, maybe what we said at the beginning. What would, in your opinion, is sort of the biggest challenges and risks with AI at present, and also within the travel industry as well?
Yeah, so there's bigger risks to do with AI, but I think we'll stay away from those right now, and we don't know what those are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's potentially damaging to jobs. I think, there's no getting away from it. There's the sort of cliche that it's not the AI that's going to take your job, it's the person using the AI, and I think that's true now. But more and more they're going to take over, and I think being adaptable, being able to move. So if you've been sitting doing this job for 30 years and you refuse to do it, I've always done it this way, I'm not going to do anything different, you might lose your job. You need to be adaptable and be able to move and take on different tasks and change with the flow. And I think the thing now is nobody knows the future. There isn't anybody. I listen to a lot of these leaders, the sort of AI leaders, talking about how they see the future. There's not much consensus there. There's lots of ideas of what may bring, but none of us know.
Yeah.
So you can't sit and plan 5 years.
Yeah.
The best you could do is be adaptable and move on what's in front of us today.
And have you had any challenges with AI in your own business? Any scenarios where maybe you've tried to implement, it hasn't worked, or you've seen something that you thought, actually, I don't like where that's going? Has there been anything like that?
Not in a sort of bad way, but a lot of things don't work. I was at one of the conferences, and Agoda were talking, Agoda, part of Booking, and I think they said 90% of what they tried failed. Not failed, it was a disaster, but just wasn't something they wanted to pursue.
Yeah. So
they got lots of experiments and just try a bit of everything and see what sticks, and then grab that 10% and run with it. And I think that's totally fine. And we've also had tools that we thought were really cool 2 years ago, and now everyone just does it on ChatGPT and they don't need our tool anymore. That's happened lots of times as well.
And that's, again, stay relevant, ahead of the game, especially if, I suppose, someone like yourself, where your business relies a lot on AI and tech. You need to be staying up to date or looking for the next opportunity, but also, I guess, have different plans in place, which is probably challenging for a leader like yourself and a business owner, and many of our community are. That's a big challenge that probably they're facing and thinking about quite a lot.
Yeah. Well, anybody in the AI world especially I think everybody's struggling because you can't see that far ahead. And you're waiting for OpenAI or one of the big LLMs to just come along and do what you do. I don't know if you remember 2 years ago when it came out, you couldn't read a PDF. You couldn't upload a PDF. So all these companies said, we built a PDF reader. And it was a magical thing, and that was their whole company. And then OpenAI comes along one day and says, now you can upload PDFs. So all their businesses just gone overnight. So I think that's a risk for anybody in the space, where you just sort of disappear overnight.
And would you say there's any sort of ethical concerns of AI and within the travel industry, and how could be used or wrongly used?
Yeah, it could definitely be wrongly used. It could definitely, things like over-tourism, if everyone's using the same sort of simple prompts and top 10 things to do in London, if that's all you ask, it'll send you to the similar top 10 places. There's all sorts of other ethics. There's some bias in it. It's trained on what we as humans wrote, and what we wrote is obviously biased. They do try and sort of train it out of that bias. There's two schools of thought on that. We have lots of bias ourselves. Anything we wrote, anything we deliver as a human has got bias. We can't train ourselves out of it. The AI can. So I think we'll lose bias over time.
Okay.
Lots of different types of bias, not just discrimination, but lots of types of bias that should be able to overcome.
I think that's interesting as well, from sort of how AI works, and you described it very well in the conversation we had before, but it's obviously taking hundreds of thousands of data points to learn, and that's how it's sort of developed over time, and it will be biased on and so forth on the information that it's gathering, and if there's a lot more about certain things, then that's why it has that, like we talk about, it's better at English because there's a lot more of that around the world, but maybe Asia it's and slightly less, so that might have an implication on what we consume as people as well.
Yeah, and they do try and train it out of that, but it's difficult to see. Like I know one of the main guys at Meta, he's Jan LeCun, he's French, and he said, listen, in France, I think he lives in America now, but he says in France we're never going to use these American engines because they're going to be biased. As much as you think they're unbiased, they're built on American culture. So we have to have a French engine for French people. Maybe that's just because they're French. But it's the same thing you mentioned, right? We probably need an LLM for each country that's trained on this culture because we believe, this is our sort of boundaries of how this culture should be.
Yeah, because I think, maybe it doesn't really take into account cultural differences and how, people have learned over the years of their way of life, and it will just give you the same sort of collective information it sees as correct, but some people might look at that differently.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no right answer to some of this stuff, and that's why we all have arguments about all kinds of things.
That's it.
Yeah.
And sort of towards the end of this conversation, but the future of AI and particularly around travel, where do you see sort of, we won't go 5 years because it could be anything in 5 years, but where can you see as sort of the key future at the moment, and where should we be looking at with AI?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. As scary as it can be when you look at some of the things that could go wrong, I'm optimistic. I think this makes everything more efficient. I think it really helps people. I believe every trip we've ever taken could be better. I believe we do a lot of things that we shouldn't do when we travel just because we didn't have good information. So I sort of believe in optimizing trips, and I think this really helps us optimize. Downside of that is if everything's super optimized, because you don't have that sense of unpredictability. But I do think people will book better trips that are more suited for them using these tools. I think everything becomes more efficient, makes travel more attainable. Probably doesn't help over tourism because it's just going to help more people travel more. But I'm genuinely positive for the short term and for the medium term.
Also, like looking back at tools that we mentioned, like the Meta glasses and things like that, I suppose that's quite exciting for the future of travel, where you could literally be walking around, you can see places and learn so much about that, but also, I want to say, like, also it's capturing what you're thinking, feeling, and so forth. It's seeing everything that you're doing and learning about your behaviors and what you like, and then maybe could sort of direct you into, similar, like, are you excited by what you're seeing? Is there exist in a different country, different ways that you could use it like that? Yeah.
Well, I always think about this stuff. You're walking around town. We're in Tokyo now, and you walk around for hours. You haven't got a clue what you're walking past most of the time. Obviously, it's in Japanese mostly. But there's probably so many stories just walking around town that even a tour guide, they wouldn't take you there because it's not crammed full of it. But I'd like to hear stories about things when I'm walking around. So it's the amount of places I've been where I've walked past places where something really interesting happened, but I just didn't ever know.
It's like a personal tour guide you have with you, where you could actually know a lot more about every location you are. Yeah. That's quite exciting.
Yeah.
And is there any sort of final things that you think, as travel industry professionals, if you had like a top, I don't know, few points where we should think about or use it or be within the AI world, what would be sort of your top 3 tips?
Number one is that I think don't be intimidated by it. Some people still are. It's a couple of years in now, and some people just don't use it and haven't even tried it. I'm not saying you need to use it all day, every day, or for everything you do, but you need to see what these tools are capable of and try and have the tools help you. I'll take that and then a step further and say within companies, I think the ownership or management need to encourage the staff to be open-minded and use the tools. And then I think probably sharing. It is a lot to be, either within a company, which is hopefully everyone's sharing, but also within the industry itself. A lot of people are happy to share what they've learned. But I think we can all do better as an industry and share what works.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's difficult if you're competing with companies, but there's a lot that we can share without, to help the industry as a whole.
Exactly. Yeah. Come together, support, and hopefully we'll grow the travel industry together. So that's quite a nice way to end that.
Yeah.
And at the end of every podcast, we always like to do a quick fire round. But I thought, being the AI conversation, I like to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to put into chat GPT about you, this conversation, the podcast, and ask us to say 5 quick-fire questions. So I'm going to chuck it into the app right now, and we'll get it live. And
should I get mine to answer it as well?
You could. Right, I'm chucking it in. I'm going to say I'm on a podcast with Christian Watts, founder and CEO of Magpie Travel. I've added the about page, and then I want to ask 5 quick-fire questions, light-hearted because we want to keep it, but around the topic of generative AI and also travel. So please, because I also heard that you said if you say please, it normally gives you nicer results. So we're going to do it live. So you know I'm using the app. So this is coming through as we are doing this podcast. Okay, and we'll say whatever it says. So number 1, if generative AI could design your dream vacation, what's the one surprise element it would add to the trip?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? I'm going to tell you, this is meant to be quick fire, but I've got a minute for a story.
We can have a story.
So I was just telling someone at lunchtime, so there's, the top 10 things to do in Paris. It would give you the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, whatever. What if it said Eiffel Tower in the morning, then Notre Dame, then jump in the river nearest you, and then swim down the river for a mile, then get out, go to the nearest cafe and order a drink. And you're thinking, oh, the thing's lost its mind. But then if you think about that, that will be your memory from Paris, not the Eiffel Tower or Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So at some point, the AI is going to know us better than we know ourselves, and it's going to tell us to do wacky stuff. And at some point, we should just trust it.
Yeah.
So I'd say that when it tells me to do, either it's going to ask me to jump off a bridge and it's not going to end well, or it'll be the best experience of my trip.
Yeah, we'll keep it for the best experience.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2. If you had to trust AI to plan your entire travel itinerary, what's the one destination you'd be sure it'd never miss?
San Francisco, but I live there, so. London, I think, is an amazing city to travel to.
Okay, so San Fran, you moved there, so you've ticked that off, so London.
Yeah.
Okay, number 3, imagine an AI could instantly translate any language, but only in rhymes. Which language would you love to hear rhymed while abroad?
That's wacky, isn't it?
That is a wacky one.
I'll say Japanese because we're here.
Yeah, these are some interesting questions. Thanks. If generative AI could predict the future of travel, what's the one futuristic travel experience you'd be most excited for?
These are good questions, aren't they?
They're better than mine.
Future experience. Oof, I don't know what to say about that one. I think something sort of all immersive, something sort of coming at your brain from all different directions and getting me full immersed, almost like a tour, but coming from all different angles and really tuning into making it the perfect tour of a city.
Interesting.
Yeah, vague answer as well, but yeah.
We can see that. We'll start working on it a bit more.
Yeah.
And okay, final question. If you could take AI on vacation with you, what would you have it do to make your travel experience more fun or interesting?
I'd say I do take AI with me. I think it's what we just talked about. It's the sort of data. It's the tour guide walking around town, telling me what's what, telling me the nearest cafe and what I'm looking at, and that's all I want. And that's here today.
There you go. Well, Christian, thank you so much for joining our Sweet Stories. It's been a very insightful conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm going to take it forward as well, and I hope all our viewers and listeners take a lot from that too. But I'm sure we can stay tuned to see all the wonderful things you're doing in the industry and learn a lot more from you. But thank you once again, and thank you to all our Sweet Stories listeners, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks, appreciate the invite.